Soul Sense by Malcolm Kingley. Before we begin, this entire presentation is spiritual in its nature and based on Christ Jesus' teachings in correlation with the discoveries of Mary Baker Eddy, the founder of Christian Science. This production is copyright 2026, Malcolm Kingley, Kingley Foundation, 508C1A, registered in the state of Washington. This presentation is designed to spread the gospel and reach the captives to set them free. The annihilation of the belief in material nerves and the revelation of man's only sensation. A Christian Science argument. Drawn wholly from the writings of Mary Baker Eddy. There is no life, truth, intelligence, nor substance in matter. Mary Baker Eddy, Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures. Preface. Pouring in Truth by Flood Tides. This book makes one argument. It states it many ways, from many sides, in rising layers, because the belief it confronts is not held by reason but by habit, and habit yields only to repetition under principle. The belief is this, that there exist material nerves, that they govern man's behavior, store his trauma, carry intelligence, and dispatch pain, weakness, and even pleasure through a body of flesh. The argument of this book is that no such thing exists, has ever existed, or could exist, and that soul sense is man's only sense. I take nothing on loan from physiology, neurology, or psychology to prove this. The case is built from a single quarry, the writings of Mary Baker Eddy. Where her teaching is needed, I bring it forward. Where her exact words serve, they appear in quotation marks. Everything else is her doctrine restated in the order of argument. The reader who wishes to check the work against her text is not only permitted, but expected to. A word on the two standpoints. Eddy taught Christian Science from two altitudes, and this book honors both. There is the absolute, science as God knows it, the divine mind beholding its own infinite and perfect creation, in which the question of nerves never arises because matter never arose. And there is the relative, the human scene, where the belief in nerves seems real and must be met, handled, and dissolved. The error is to confound them, to argue from the human scene as though it were final, or to declaim the absolute over a suffering belief without doing the work of correction. This book opens in the absolute, descends to meet the claim where it lives, dismantles it there, and returns to the absolute, so that the reader is left standing where Eddy stood, in the unbroken allness of soul. The aim is not to manage the belief in material nerves, but to destroy it, to show that it is not a small truth, but no truth, not a lesser sense, but no sense, a counterfeit with no original. When that is seen, soul sense is not gained. It is uncovered, having been man's only sense all along. Truth is poured in by flood tides. Let us begin to pour. The architecture of the book. Part 1. The ground. Laying the principle before the demolition. The one sensation, soul as the only sense. What the Scripture and the discoverer saw, God all, matter nothing. Defining the terms, soul, sense, nerve, sensation, belief. Part 2. The indictment. The belief dismantled, claim by claim 4. The claim that nerves have intelligence, 5. The claim that nerves transmit pain, 6. The claim that nerves decay and disable, degenerative disease, malfunction, and paralysis, 7. The claim that nerves store trauma, memory, fear, and the record in matter, 8. The claim that nerves govern behavior, will, compulsion, and the so-called law of the body. 9. The claim that nerves give pleasure, the subtler bondage. 10. The claim that nerves are inherited, heredity, genetics, and the lie of transmission. 11. The witness of the severed nerve, phantom pain, anesthesia, and matter's testimony against itself. Part 3. The hidden operator. Animal magnetism and the argument of error, the engine beneath every claim. 12. Unmasking the suggestion, animal magnetism as the engine of the nerve belief. 13. The forms of the one error, mental malpractice, aggressive mental suggestion, and hypnotism. 14. Malice against truth, mental assassination, the claim of a hostile mind, and why it has no power. Part 4. The revelation, the affirmative reconstruction. 15. Sensation was never in matter, where it always was. 16. The 5 avenues and the one discernment. 17. Soul cannot be in body, reversing the lie of location. 18. Man as idea, not organism. Part 5. The practice. Meeting the human scene, then dissolving it. 19. The argument as treatment. Handling the belief of nerves. 20. Flood tides. Pouring in truth line upon line. 21. The absolute and the relative. Holding allness while meeting the claim. Part 6. The absolute. Closing in pure science. 22. As God knows his own creation. The view from soul. 23. The scientific statement of being, read through the nerve. Coda. Benediction. Part 1. The ground. Chapter 1. The one sensation. Soul as the only sense. We do not begin with the nerve. To begin with the nerve would be to grant it the first thing it asks, a place to stand. We begin instead where Mary Baker Eddy began, and where God has never ceased to be, with soul, which is God, sensing his own infinite being. 1. The thesis stated before the error is named. Let the conclusion stand at the head of the book, plainly, so that everything afterward is seen as its unfolding and not its discovery. Man has one sense, and that sense is soul sense. He has it now. He has never had another. There is no second faculty, housed in tissue, by which he also and additionally feels. For there is no second self, no second mind, no second substance in which such a faculty could be lodged. The belief in material nerves is the belief in a rival sensation, a sense that is not soul's. And the whole of this argument is the demonstration that a sense which is not soul's is not a sense at all. This is not a cautious claim. Eddy was not cautious. There is no life, truth, intelligence, nor substance in matter, she wrote. And with that sentence, she did not weaken the nerve's authority by degrees. She abolished its foundation entirely. If there is no intelligence in matter, the nerve cannot carry intelligence. If there is no substance in matter, there is no nerve to carry anything. If there is no life in matter, nothing in the body lives to feel. The nerve is not demoted in this science. It is found never to have been. 2. Why we begin in the absolute. Eddy taught from 2 standpoints, and the order matters. There is divine science as God knows it, the absolute, and there is its application to the human scene. The temptation is always to start in the human scene, to begin with, "I feel," to grant the sensation its reality, and then attempt, belatedly, to argue it down. That method loses before it begins, because it has already signed the lie's first premise, that there is something there to argue with. So we start above the claim. In the absolute, God, whom Eddy names soul, spirit, mind, principle, life, truth, love, knows his own creation. This knowing is not the knowing of an observer who might be deceived. It is the knowing of the Creator who is also the All, in whom there is no second thing to know, and no faculty of error by which to misknow it. Divine mind senses its own infinite and unbroken being. This sensing is the only sensation there is. It is whole, painless, and eternal, because that which it senses, infinite good, is whole, painless, and eternal. Man, in this science, is not a separate creature granted a borrowed mind and a body of his own. Man is the reflection, the image and likeness, the very expression of soul. Eddy is exact on the point. Man is not matter. He is not made up of brain, blood, bones, and other material elements. What man reflects, he has. What man reflects, he is, as the reflection in the glass is nothing but the original it shows. And what man reflects is soul's own sensing. Therefore man's sense is soul sense, not a faint copy of it, not a spiritualized version of a material original, but soul's one sensation appearing as the consciousness of God's man. There is the entire affirmative case, stated once, before a single nerve has been allowed to speak. 3. The lie of two. Every error this book will examine, that nerves think, that they hurt, that they remember, that they compel, that they please, is a variation on a single prior error, and that error is the number 2. There is one God. Eddy will not divide him. All is infinite mind and its infinite manifestation, for God is all in all. If God is all, then there is not God and matter, mind and a nervous system, soul sense and a sensation in the flesh. The conjunction "and" is the whole disease. The moment a second sensation is admitted, a feeling that arrives not from soul but from a nerve, the allness of God has been quietly denied, and every subsequent suffering follows as a matter of course from that first concession. This is why soul sense cannot be merely the better of two senses. The spiritual one we ought to prefer over the material one. To call it the better of two is still to grant the two. Soul sense is the only sense precisely because soul is the only mind. A sensation proceeding from matter would have to proceed from a mind in matter, and Eddy has already told us there is no intelligence in matter for it to proceed from. The material nerve, then, is not a humble organ doing honest if lowly work. It is a claimant to a throne that has no second seat. It is two, wearing the costume of an organ. 4. What sense actually is. We must be clear what we mean by sense, or the reader will hear soul sense as a poetic substitute for ordinary feeling and miss the whole. To sense is to be conscious, to apprehend, to know, to be aware of being. The question is never whether man is conscious. It is of what and through what is he conscious. The belief in material nerves answers, man is conscious of matter, through matter. The nerve receives a stimulus, the flesh reports to the flesh, and consciousness is the smoke that rises off this material fire. On that account, sensation is matter's gift and matter's prison. What the nerves give, they can also withhold, distort, and torment with. Christian Science answers otherwise. Consciousness is soul's, and what it apprehends is soul's own creation. Spiritual sense is a conscious, constant capacity to understand God. Mark every word. It is conscious, sense in the fullest meaning, awareness itself, not a dim metaphor for awareness. It is constant. It cannot be switched off by an anesthetic or severed by a blade, because it does not depend on a wire of tissue. It is a capacity to understand God. That is, its object is not matter at all, but infinite good. This is the sense man actually has. It is the only one he has ever exercised, even in the hours he believed a nerve was doing the work. 5. The objection that founds the rest of the book. The reader will already be pressing the one objection that every page hereafter exists to answer. But I feel. I burned my hand and it hurt. I am tired in my body. The nerve is not a theory to me. It is an experience. How can you tell me my own sensation is no sensation? The objection is honest, and it is the right one, and this book will not dodge it or dissolve it in rhetoric. But notice, at the outset, what the objection actually establishes and what it does not. It establishes that there is consciousness, that something is apprehended. It does not establish where that consciousness resides, or through what it operates, or what it truly apprehends. The whole of physiology is the unproven assumption that the answer to all three is matter. The whole of Christian Science is the demonstration that the answer to all three is soul, and that the apparent testimony of pain is not a true report from a real nerve, but, in Eddy's exact phrase concerning the boil, a belief called by the name of a bodily thing. For matter without mind is not painful. We will earn that demonstration. We will take the claim of the nerve apart, joint by joint, its claim to intelligence, to pain, to memory, to compulsion, to pleasure. And at each joint we will find the same thing. Not a real faculty doing a real work badly, but mortal belief producing its own phenomenon and then, as Eddy said, charging it to something else, like a kitten glancing into the mirror at itself and thinking it sees another kitten. The nerve is the kitten's mirror. The sensation it seems to send was never in it. It was a belief, projected onto matter, and read back as matter's message. 6. Returning to the absolute. So we end this first layer where we began it, only now with the error named. In the absolute, God knows his own creation, and that knowing is whole. Man, his reflection, senses with soul's one sensation and no other. The belief in material nerves proposes a second sensation, lodged in a second substance, governed by a second mind, and at every point the second thing is found to be nothing, because God is all in all, and there is no room in allness for a second of anything. This is the ground. Upon it the indictment is built. Before we permit the nerve to make a single one of its 5 great claims, let it be on record that it makes them as a counterfeit makes its denominations, confidently, in the currency of the real, and backed by nothing. Soul sense is man's only sense. The rest of this book is the flood tide that washes the counterfeit away. Chapter 2. What the Scripture and the Discoverer saw. God all, matter nothing. Every argument has a premise it cannot prove from within itself, a place where it must simply see and declare. Physiology has one, that matter exists and is the seat of life. It never proves this. It assumes it on the first page and builds the nerve upon it. Christian Science has one too, but it does not borrow it from observation, which is the very faculty in question. It takes it from revelation, confirmed by demonstration. God is infinite spirit, and therefore all. From that one seeing, the nerve's whole world falls, not by degrees, but at the foundation. the way a house falls when the ground it stood on is found never to have been there. 1. The premise that decides everything. Eddy's definition of God is not decorative. It is the hinge of the entire system, and every claim of the material nerve is decided the instant it is laid against it. Question: what is God? Answer: God is incorporeal, divine, supreme, infinite mind, spirit, soul, principle, life, truth, love. Hold the two words infinite and spirit together, and the conclusion is already forced. Infinite means without bound, without outside, without a region where it leaves off and something else begins. Spirit means the opposite of matter. Now, if spirit is infinite, there is no border at which spirit stops and matter starts, because the infinite has no border. There is therefore no room anywhere for a substance that is not spirit. Eddy presses exactly this. If spirit is all and is everywhere, then matter is nowhere. For the greater cannot be poured into the lesser, and the all leaves no elsewhere for a rival to occupy. This is why she could write, without softening, all is infinite mind and its infinite manifestation, for God is all in all. Not God and a material universe under his management. Not spirit plus a nervous system he permits to operate. God, all in all. The conjunction is forbidden at the root. And a nerve is, by every definition physiology gives it, a piece of the very thing, matter, that infinitude has left no place for. So the case against material nerves does not begin with nerves at all. It begins one story down, at the premise, where the question is settled before the nerve is ever examined. If God is all, the nerve is not a small reality. It is no reality. Everything after this chapter is simply the patient tracing out of that single fact into each corner where the belief had hidden. 2. The scientific statement of being. Read with the nerve in view, Eddy gave the science of being its most concentrated form in 7 sentences. She called the scientific statement of being. We will return to them in the final chapter and read them again, having earned them. Here, at the ground, we read them once, asking of each clause, what does this do to the nerve? There is no life, truth, intelligence, nor substance in matter. No life, so nothing in the body lives to feel. No intelligence, so the nerve carries no message, for it has nothing to know with and nothing to know. No substance, so the nerve has no being to be a nerve. The first sentence alone has already dissolved the 4 great claims we will examine. A thing with no life cannot weaken, with no intelligence cannot think or remember, with no substance cannot transmit, and with no truth in it cannot truthfully report a single pain. All is infinite mind and its infinite manifestation, for God is all in all. The positive form of the same demolition. There is no second somewhere from which a material sensation could arrive. Whatever is mind and mind's manifestation. A sensation that is not mind's is not anywhere, for there is no not mind for it to be in. Spirit is immortal truth. Matter is mortal error. Here matter is given its true name. It is not a lower grade of reality. It is error, a mistake, a misstatement, the false where the true should stand. The nerve, as a thing of matter, is not an imperfect organ. It is an item in a mistake. Spirit is the real and eternal. Matter is the unreal and temporal. The line that forbids compromise. Matter is not weakly real, briefly real, real for now. It is unreal. There is no such thing as a real nerve that merely behaves badly. There is only the unreal seeming, for a time, to behave at all. Spirit is God, and man is his image and likeness. Therefore, man is not material, he is spiritual. And the conclusion that lands the whole statement on man himself, where the nerve had claimed its territory. Man is the image of spirit. An image of spirit is spiritual, as the image in a glass is of the same nature as what it shows. Man is therefore not material, not partly, not in his body while spiritual in his soul, but not material. The nerve claimed to be the wiring of man's body. The statement answers that man has no material body to be wired. 7 sentences, and the nervous system has nowhere left to stand. The rest of the book does not add to this argument. It only refuses to let the belief slip back in through the side doors of pain, memory, compulsion, and pleasure, one door at a time. 3. The two creations and which one the nerve belongs to. Eddie read scripture with the same exactness she brought to science, and nowhere more decisively than in the opening of Genesis, where she found not one account of creation, but 2, and taught that they cannot both be true because they flatly contradict. In the first, Genesis 1 through the 3rd verse of chapter 2, God creates by the Word, creates man in his own image and likeness, gives him dominion, and pronounces the whole very good. There is no matter described here as substance, no formation of man from dust, no breath blown into clay, no organ named. This is creation as soul knows it, spiritual, complete, perfect, finished. Eddie held this record to be the true one, the absolute, God beholding his own creation. Then, abruptly, a second account begins, and its tone is the reverse. Now, there went up a mist from the ground. Now man is formed of dust. A breath is breathed into a body, and from that body a material creation unfolds, a creation that can be tempted, can fall, can sicken, can die. Eddie did not harmonize the two. She taught that the second is the false account, the dream, the lie about creation that begins precisely where the mist begins. She named its central figure plainly in her glossary. Adam is error, a falsity, the supposition that life and intelligence proceed from matter. This division is not a side doctrine. It is the location of the nerve. Ask of the nervous system, to which creation does it belong? It is nowhere in the first. God's spiritual man, made in the image of infinite spirit and pronounced very good, has no nerve, because he has no flesh to thread it through and no capacity for the pain a nerve was invented to deliver. The nerve appears only in the second account, the dust man, the formed body, the dream that rose with the mist. The nervous system is a fixture of the Adam dream and of nothing else. It was never created. It was supposed. This is the most important geographical fact in the book. The whole error of physiology is to take the second creation for the real one and then study its furniture as though it were God's handiwork. Christian Science studies the first and finds the second to be exactly what Eddie called it, a dream from which man is to awake, not a world he must learn to endure. 4. The mist. With a live sensation enters. It is worth lingering on that mist, a mist from the ground, for it marks the precise point at which material sensation enters the story. As vapor, as the obscuring of a clear creation, as the first fog of a false sense. Before the mist, all is seen as God sees it, spiritual, good, finished. With the mist comes a second way of seeing, sensation that claims to rise from the ground, from matter, from the body. This is the birth of what Eddie calls material sense, or mortal mind's testimony, the report that life, feeling, and intelligence are down here in the dust. Every nerve sensation a man believes he receives is, in this reading, a particle of that original mist, vapor mistaken for substance, fog reported as fact. And note what mist does. It does not create a second world. It merely hides the real one. The mist over a valley does not abolish the valley. It persuades the eye that the valley is not there. Just so, material sensation does not give man a real second body with real nerves. It persuades him that his one spiritual selfhood is a thing of flesh that aches. The work of science is not to fight the valley back into existence. It never left. But to let the mist lift. When it lifts, there was never a nerve under it. There was the spiritual man of the first creation, whole the whole time. 5. Why the premise cannot be split. Here we must close one escape route, because the belief in nerves will try it again and again throughout the book. The route is partial agreement. The proposal that we keep most of Eddie's teaching, but grant the nerve a small, honest corner. Surely, the belief murmurs, spirit is supreme. And yet the body really does have a nervous system that really does carry real signals. Let us be spiritual without being unreasonable. But the premise will not divide. Infinite has no minority share to give away. If matter is real even in one nerve, even for 1 second of pain, then spirit is not infinite, for it has met a border, the border of that nerve, at which it stopped and something else began. And if spirit is not infinite, God is not God as Eddie defined him, and the entire science collapses into the very dualism it was given to heal. There is no stable resting place halfway down. Either God is all and the nerve is nothing, or the nerve is something and God is not all. Eddie chose, and chose without remainder. This book holds her there, and will not let the belief negotiate back the corner that infinitude forbids. 6. What the discoverer saw. So we have the ground entire. The premise is God, infinite, spirit, all in all. The scientific statement of being unfolds that premise and, doing so, empties matter of life, intelligence, and substance, which are the only things from which a nerve could be made or by which it could act. Scripture, read with science, locates the nervous system not in God's creation, but in the dream that rose with the mist, the second and false account that Christian science exists to dispel. And the premise refuses to be split, so the belief gets no corner to keep. This is what Mary Baker Eddy saw, and what she meant when she insisted that her science was discovered, not invented, that she had not built a philosophy, but uncovered a fact. The fact is that God is all, that his creation is wholly spiritual and wholly good, and that the material nerve, with its freight of pain and weakness and false pleasure, is no part of it. With the ground this firm beneath us, we can let the nerve come forward and make its claims. It will make 5 of them. Before it speaks, we fix the words it will try to use, so that it cannot win by smuggling its meanings into ours. That is the work of the next chapter. Chapter 3. Defining the terms: soul, sense, nerve, sensation, belief. Arguments are won and lost in the dictionary before they are ever fought in the open. The belief in material nerves does most of its work in the quiet space where words are defined, by handing us its meanings dressed as plain common sense, so that we agree to its conclusions while we still think we are only agreeing to language. Mary Baker Eddy understood this perfectly, and her glossary is not an appendix but a battlefield. She takes the common words and reverses them, restoring to each its spiritual meaning and exposing the material meaning as the counterfeit. Before the nerve makes a single claim, we must do the same with the 5 words on which the whole dispute turns: soul, sense, sensation, nerve, belief, or we will lose the case in advance simply by accepting the enemy's vocabulary. 1. Why definitions are warfare. Consider how much is already decided the moment one accepts the ordinary definition of nerve, a fiber that conducts sensation between the body and the brain. Accept that, and you have already granted that there is a body, that sensation is in it, that it travels, and that the brain receives it. The argument is over. The nerve has won at the level of the word before any evidence is weighed. Eddy's method is to refuse the definition itself, to ask not, how do nerves work, but what is the thing we are calling a nerve, in truth? And to answer that question from God down, not from dust up. So we proceed term by term, each time setting the counterfeit meaning beside the true one, and keeping only the true. 2. Soul. God, not a tenet of the body. Begin with the highest word, because the whole affirmative case rests on it. In common speech, soul means an immaterial something each person possesses, housed inside the body, the seat of feeling and personality, the ghost in the machine of nerves. Eddy abolishes this meaning entirely. For her, soul is one of the synonyms of God. It is not had, it is God. There is no plural of it and no private allotment of it. Soul or spirit signifies deity and nothing else. There is no finite soul nor spirit. This single correction overturns the architecture of the nerve belief. The whole physiological picture depends on soul being inside, a feeling self lodged in a body, receiving the body's reports through the nerves. But if soul is God, infinite and incorporeal, then soul is not in the body at all. Rather, all that truly is in soul, expressed by soul, known by soul. Man does not possess a soul that the nerves report to. Man is the expression of soul, the way reflection is the expression of the original. And an expression of God has no interior chamber for nerves to wire, and no resident self for them to torment. We will return to this reversal of location in Chapter 12. Here it is enough to fix the definition. Soul is God. The soul in the body is the first counterfeit, and the one that makes all the others possible. 3. Sense and sensation. The word reclaimed. Now the central pair, and the most delicate, because here the belief's chief trick is to make us think the spiritual meaning is a mere metaphor, and the material meaning the literal one. We must reverse exactly that. To sense is to be conscious, to apprehend, to be aware. Of this there are two opposing accounts. Material sense is the supposed faculty by which matter is conscious of matter, the body feeling the body, the report carried by the nerve. Spiritual sense, or soul sense, is the conscious capacity of the real man, who is soul's reflection, to apprehend reality, which is God and his spiritual creation. Eddy's definition of the second is exact, and must be weighed word by word, as we began to weigh it in Chapter 1. Spiritual sense is a conscious, constant capacity to understand God. The decisive point of definition is this: only one of these two is a sense at all. Material sense cannot truly sense, because matter has no consciousness with which to sense, and, being unreal, has no real existence in which to be conscious. What is called material sensation is therefore not a faculty doing real work. It is mortal mind's belief about a faculty, a supposition wearing the name of a sense. Eddy does not grant it equal standing and then rank it lower. She denies it the status of sense outright. The physical senses can take no cognizance of God and spiritual truth, and a faculty that cannot apprehend the one thing that is real is no organ of apprehension at all. It is an organ of error, which is to say, no organ. So when this book says, soul sense is man's only sense, the word sense is being used in its single true meaning, and the phrase material sense is being exposed as a contradiction in terms, as if one spoke of dry water. Sensation, rightly defined, is soul's. Material sensation is the counterfeit coinage, real-looking and backed by nothing. 4. Nerve. Not an organ, but an article of belief. We come to the word the whole book is about, and here Eddie's reversal is most bracing. In common definition, a nerve is a real fiber in a real body that conducts real sensation. In Christian Science, a nerve is none of these things. It is an element of a belief, specifically of the belief that there is sensation in matter. It is not a thing that has the property of belief attached to it. It is belief itself, given a name and a supposed location. Matter, Eddie teaches, is destitute of sensation. The nerve is the fiction by which mortal mind explains to itself the sensation it believes matter to have. Read carefully, this dissolves the very category. We are accustomed to think the question is whether nerves work well or badly, whether this nerve is healthy, that one damaged, this one inflamed. Christian Science says the prior question has been skipped, whether there is a nerve at all, and the answer is no. There is the belief in nerves, which produces, in mortal experience, every phenomenon attributed to them, and which, like every belief, can be examined, doubted, and finally given up. When it is given up, nothing is lost, because there was no organ. There was only the conviction that there was one. The nerve is not a fact to be repaired, but a belief to be released. This is why no chapter in Part 2 will argue that nerves are unimportant or overrated. Each will argue that the specific work attributed to the nerve, thinking, hurting, remembering, compelling, pleasing, is work that no nerve does, because there is no nerve, and that what seemed to be the nerve's doing was, in every case, belief producing its own phenomenon and signing the nerve's name to it. 5. Belief and understanding, the technical vocabulary. That brings us to the word that has been doing quiet labor in every paragraph above, and which must now be defined exactly, because in Christian Science it is a term of art. Belief does not here mean an opinion sincerely held. It means a supposition of mortal mind, a claim put forward as if true, which has no foundation in the divine mind, and therefore no reality, however vividly it presents itself. Its opposite is not disbelief, but understanding, the apprehension of spiritual fact, which is soul sense in exercise. The mortal scene is the realm of belief. Science is the realm of understanding, and healing is the passage from the one to the other. This is why, throughout the book, the enemy is named the belief in material nerves, and not material nerves. The phrasing is precise, not polite. There are no material nerves to be against. There is only a belief in them, and a belief is exactly the kind of thing that yields to understanding. To call the nerve a belief is already half the cure, because it relocates the whole problem from an organ we cannot reach into a supposition we can correct. The nerve, named as fact, is a tyrant. The nerve, named as belief, is a defendant, and this book is its trial. 6. The reversal applied. Rereading, "My nerves hurt." With the 5 words restored, take the sentence with which ordinary experience states its whole case. "My nerves hurt," and read it again through the corrected vocabulary, and watch it come apart. But the me that owns this hurt is supposed to be a soul lodged in a body, and we have found that soul is God, incorporeal, not a tenant of flesh. The possessive has no owner of the kind the sentence assumes. Nerves. But a nerve is not an organ. It is an element of the belief that matter feels. So the subject of the sentence is not a thing, but a supposition. Hurt. But matter is destitute of sensation, and matter without mind is not painful. So the predicate names an action that the subject, being matter, cannot perform. What remains of "my nerves hurt" when each word is held to its true meaning? Not a report from the body, but a belief of mortal mind, presenting its own self-produced phenomenon and charging it, in Eddie's image, to something else. The kitten again, mistaking its own reflection for another kitten. The sentence does not describe a fact about the body. It describes a state of belief about a body that in the science of being was never there to begin with. The terms are now fixed. Soul is God, not a self in the flesh. Sense is souls alone. Material sense is a contradiction. The nerve is a belief, not an organ. Belief is the false. Understanding is the true. With this vocabulary held firmly, and held against every attempt of the belief to slip its own meanings back in, we are ready to let the nerve come forward and make its 5 great claims. Part 1 has built the ground and forged the words. Part 2 puts the nerve on trial. Part 2, the indictment. Chapter 4, the claim that nerves have intelligence. The nerve comes forward to make its case, and it makes 5 claims. We try the first one first, not by accident but by necessity, for it is the claim on which the other 4 are built. The nerve claims to transmit pain, but to transmit is to carry a message, and a message presupposes meaning, which presupposes knowing. The nerve claims to store trauma, but to store is to retain a record, and a record is information, which presupposes a knower. The nerve claims to govern behavior, but to govern is to direct, and to direct is to know toward what end. Every later claim of the nerve is a claim about intelligence wearing a different coat. So if we can show that the nerve has no intelligence, that it neither knows, nor means, nor records, nor directs, the rest of the indictment is half won before it is argued. This is the keystone. Pull it, and the arch comes down. 1. The claim as physiology makes it. Let us state the belief at full strength, giving it every advantage so that no one can say we defeated a weakened version. Physiology holds that the nerve is a conductor of information, that the senses gather data from the world, that the nerves carry this data, encoded, to the brain, that the brain, itself a mass of nervous tissue, processes the data and produces perception, memory, decision, and the sense of self. On this account, intelligence is a property of organized matter. The brain is the organ of mind, the nerves its messengers, and a man's knowing is the activity of his nervous system. The claim is not modest. It is total. It makes intelligence the achievement of the very matter whose existence Chapter 2 has already denied. 2. The premise has already answered, but we do not rest there. We could, in strict honesty, end the chapter at its opening, for the premise settles it. There is no life, truth, intelligence, nor substance in matter. The word intelligence stands in that sentence by name. The case is decided. But the belief in nerves does not yield to a single sentence, however final, because it does not live by reason, it lives by repetition and the appearance of evidence. So we will do what Eddie did, pour in truth by flood tides, tracing the one fact into every corner where the belief had taken cover. We will give 3 arguments, and each will arrive at the same destination the premise named. There is no intelligence in the nerve, because there is no intelligence in matter, because there is but one mind, and that mind is God. 3. First argument. There is but one mind, and it is not in matter. Begin with the highest ground, and the claim falls without a struggle. Intelligence is the property of mind. Mind, in Christian Science, is one of the synonyms of God. Incorporeal, divine, supreme, infinite mind, spirit, soul, principle, life, truth, love. And there is but one. There can be but one, for the same reason there can be but one infinite. A second mind would have to exist somewhere outside the first, and the infinite has no outside. All intelligence, therefore, is the one mind's, undivided and unshared. Now lay the nerve against this. For the nerve to have intelligence, there would have to be a mind in matter, a second knower, lodged in tissue, thinking thoughts the divine mind does not think. But a second mind is precisely what infinitude forbids. The proposal that the brain thinks is not a small biological claim. It is the claim that there exists a mind that is not God's, made of a substance that is not spirit, generating an intelligence that infinite mind does not contain. It is polytheism in a laboratory coat. Many little minds, one to each skull. Christian Science answers, as it answers every two, that there is one mind and no other, and that what is called the intelligence of the brain is the attribution to matter of a faculty that belongs to God alone. The nerve does not have a little intelligence. It has none, because all intelligence is mind's, and mind is not in it. 4. Second argument. Matter cannot originate thought. The witness of the lifeless body. Leave the heights for a moment and meet the belief on its own ground, the ground of evidence. For even there it cannot make its case. The physiologist says intelligence is produced by the brain and carried by the nerves. Very well. Then let us watch what happens to intelligence when the matter remains, but the supposed producer stops producing. Consider the body at the moment life is said to depart. Every nerve is still there. The brain is still there, every fiber and cell of it intact, the matter undiminished. By the physiologist's own theory, the organ of intelligence is fully present. Yet there is no thought, no perception, no knowing, none of the faculties the matter was credited with the moment before. The matter is unchanged. The intelligence is wholly gone. What does this prove? It proves that the intelligence was never in the matter, for if it had been, it would remain while the matter remains. A property cannot depart while the thing that possesses it stays. Sweetness does not leave the sugar while the sugar lasts. If knowing leaves the brain while the brain endures, then knowing was never a property of the brain. It was only attributed to it, credited to the tissue by a belief, while something else did the knowing all along. This is the corpse's silent testimony, and it is decisive. The matter of the nervous system can be present in full and contribute exactly nothing. Therefore, the contribution was never the matter's. The nerve was a conductor that conducted nothing, a knower that never knew, a name written over a function that belonged to mind and to mind alone. 5. Third argument. The wire is not the message. Grant the belief its favorite figure, and it still cannot win. It loves to call the nerve a wire, a cable, a line carrying signals. And the figure is more revealing than the belief intends, for it gives the whole case away. A wire is not intelligent. A telegraph cable does not understand the message that runs along it. It carries a meaning it does not possess, between two terminals that supply what it lacks. The intelligence, on the wire's own account, is never in the wire. It is at the ends. So press the figure to its ends and ask, what intelligence stands at the terminals of this nerve? At one end, matter, the body, which Chapter 2 found to be without life or intelligence. At the other end, more matter, the brain, which the lifeless body just proved contributes nothing of its own. There is no knower at either terminal. The wire carries a message that no one at either end composed, understood, or received. Strip the metaphor of its borrowed plausibility, and what remains is a conductor running between two pieces of non-intelligent matter, carrying, on the belief's own showing, nothing that either end could supply. The wire figure does not save the nerve's intelligence. It localizes the intelligence away from the nerve, and then finds nothing where it pointed. 6. What is really happening? The kitten and the mirror. If the nerve does not know, then where does the vivid impression of a knowing body come from? It comes from exactly where Eddie said all such impressions come from. Mortal mind produces its own phenomena, and then charges them to something else, like a kitten glancing into the mirror at itself and thinking it sees another kitten. This is the whole mechanism of the illusion of nerve intelligence, stated in a single image, and it is worth dwelling on because it recurs at every claim in this book. Mortal mind, the supposititious false sense that rose with the mist, generates a phenomenon, the appearance of a knowing, sensing body. Then, unwilling or unable to recognize the phenomenon as its own, it attributes the knowing to the body, to the brain, to the nerve. The kitten produces the image and credits it to a second kitten that is not there. Mortal mind produces the impression of intelligence and credits it to a nerve that has none. The nerve is the mirror, a surface onto which mortal belief projects its own activity and from which it reads that activity back, mistaking projection for report. There is no second kitten behind the glass. There is no intelligence inside the nerve. There is only belief, looking at its own reflection and naming it the body's mind. 7. The objection from learning, reflex, and instinct. The belief will not retire without its strongest counter, and honesty requires we meet it. But the body learns, it says. The hand pulls back from fire before thought. The trained musician's fingers know the keys. Instinct moves the infant to the breast. Is this not intelligence in the very nerve and muscle? Knowledge written into the flesh below the level of the conscious mind? The objection is forceful only so long as its terms go unexamined. Held to the vocabulary fixed in Chapter 3, it dissolves. For what is being described as knowledge in the flesh is, in every instance, the operation of belief. Mortal mind's habitual, swift, below-the-surface activity, attributed to the matter through which it appears to act. The reflex is not the nerve knowing. It is belief operating with the rapidity of long habit and crediting the nerve, exactly as the kitten credits the glass. The musician's knowing fingers are not intelligent fibers. They are the appearance, in matter, of a mental facility that is entirely mental. For let the belief in the skill be disturbed, and the knowing fingers know nothing, though every nerve remains. That instinct and reflex run below the conscious mortal mind no more proves them properties of matter than the unnoticed beating of fear in a frightened man proves fear a property of his blood. Below conscious mortal mind is not the same as outside mind altogether. It is mortal mind's own basement, not the nerve's private intelligence. The flesh has learned nothing. Belief has formed a habit and signed the body's name to it. 8. Return to the absolute, the one intelligence reflected. So the keystone is pulled. The nerve does not know. It has no intelligence because all intelligence is the one mind's. Matter cannot originate thought, as the lifeless body proves by keeping its tissue and losing its knowing in the same instant. And even on the belief's own wire and signal figure, there is no knower at either end for the nerve to serve. What look like the intelligence of the nervous system is mortal mind producing its phenomenon and charging it to the flesh, the kitten and the mirror once more. And now the positive truth stands clear, which was the point of pulling the keystone in the first place. Man is intelligent, profoundly, ceaselessly intelligent, but his intelligence is not manufactured in a brain and ferried along nerves. It is reflected. Man knows because he is the image and likeness of the mind that is God, and reflection shows forth all that the original is. His knowing is not a small flame kindled in tissue and snuffed when the tissue fails. It is the constant shining of infinite mind in its own expression, which no scalpel reaches and no death extinguishes, because it was never lit in matter to begin with. The corpse loses its intelligence because that intelligence was never there. The real man loses nothing, for his intelligence was never in the part that died. With the claim to intelligence struck down, the nerve's remaining claims stand on air. It cannot truly transmit, for it cannot know what it carries. It cannot store, for it cannot hold a record it has no mind to keep. It cannot govern, for it cannot direct toward an end it has no intelligence to see. Yet the belief will press each of these in turn, dressed in the particular vividness of pain, of memory, of compulsion, of pleasure, and each must be met on its own terms, with the same patient flood. We begin with the loudest of them, the one that seems to need no argument because it shouts. We turn to the claim that nerves transmit pain. Chapter 5. The claim that nerves transmit pain. This is the claim that seems to need no argument because it does not argue, it shouts. The intelligence of nerves can be debated in a quiet room. Their pain announces itself and demands to be believed on the spot. A man will grant you, abstractly, that matter has no mind, and then strike his hand and lose the whole concession in an instant, because the pain feels like the most certain thing in the world. So this chapter must do what the loud claim dares us to do: stand in the very presence of the shout, and show that it is, even there, a belief and not a fact. We will not whisper around the pain. We will walk straight up to it, and we will find, where it claimed to be most undeniable, that it is most exactly what Eddie said it was. 1. The claim as physiology makes it. Stated at full force, physiology holds that certain nerves exist whose office is to register damage and threat, that when tissue is harmed, these nerves fire, that the signal travels to the brain, and that the brain renders the signal as the conscious experience of pain. On this account, pain is matter's alarm, a real message about a real injury, carried by a real fiber to a real organ that really suffers. The nerve is the wire of agony, and the body's capacity to hurt is the proof, beyond all metaphysics, that sensation lives in the flesh. 2. The keystone has already cracked the claim. Before we meet the shout on its own terms, recall what Chapter 4 established, because it has already done quiet damage here. Pain, on the physiologist's own account, is a message, a signal that means injury, carried and interpreted. But meaning, message, and interpretation are functions of intelligence, and we have seen that the nerve has none. A wire with no knower at either end cannot carry a meaning. It can only be said to by a belief that supplies the meaning and credits it to the wire. So the claim to transmit pain is already standing on the claim to intelligence, which has already fallen. What remains is to show, directly and at close range, that the felt pain itself, set aside the question of transmission, is a state of belief and not a property of matter. For this we go to Eddie's central text. 3. The boil. Read closely. Mary Baker Eddy chose her example with deliberate audacity. She did not pick a faint ache or a passing twinge. She picked something that throbs, that no one doubts, that announces its location and its agony without apology. You say a boil is painful, but that is impossible, for matter without mind is not painful. The boil simply manifests, through inflammation and swelling, a belief in pain, and this belief is called a boil. Weigh the structure of the sentence, for it is a complete argument compressed into 3 clauses. First, the concession. You say a boil is painful. She grants the universal report, the shout itself. Second, the contradiction. But that is impossible. Not unlikely, not exaggerated, but impossible, and impossible for a stated reason. Third, the reason. For matter without mind is not painful. There is the whole case. Pain is not a property matter can possess on its own, because matter without mind is inert, insensible, incapable of suffering or of anything. If there is pain, then mind is present in the experience, and since matter has no mind of its own, the pain is not the matter's at all. It is a state of mortal mind, manifested through inflammation and swelling, and then named by the name of a bodily thing. The boil is not a painful object. It is a belief in pain that mortal mind has produced and labeled boil. This is the kitten and the mirror again, in its most visceral form. Mortal mind generates the suffering and charges it to the flesh. The throb in the boil is the reflection mistaken for a second kitten. The pain is real as belief, vivid, insistent, wholly convincing, and unreal as a report from matter, because the matter it claims to come from has nothing with which to hurt. 4. Pain is a state of mortal mind, not a property of matter. Generalize the boil and you have the law. Wherever there is pain, the pain is a state of the only thing that can suffer, mind, and never of the matter to which it is attributed. The proof is built into the terms. To suffer is to be conscious of suffering. Consciousness is mind's. Matter has no consciousness of its own. Therefore, matter does not and cannot suffer. The pain a man assigns to his nerve is a pain occurring in mortal belief and located in the nerve by that belief. The way a dreamer locates terror in a pursuing figure who exists only in the dream. The figure does not frighten the dreamer. The dreaming mind frightens itself and assigns the fear to the figure. The nerve does not pain the man. Mortal mind pains itself and assigns the pain to the nerve. Note carefully what is and is not being denied. We do not deny that the experience occurs. We deny its claimed source and its claimed nature. The suffering is not nothing as experience. It is a genuine state of belief, and belief, while it lasts, is felt with full force. What is nothing is the material cause, the real nerve really transmitting a real injury. There is no such transmission because there is no intelligence to carry the message, no sensation in the matter to originate it, and no mind in the flesh to suffer it. The pain is mental throughout, produced in belief, suffered in belief, and curable, therefore, only where it lives, in belief, by truth. 5. Fear, the fountain beneath the pain. Trace the pain to its root, and you reach not tissue, but fear. Eddy located the procuring cause of sickness in fear, ignorance, or sin. And of these, fear is the one that stands beneath nearly every pain. The injury is feared before it is felt. The dread of the body's vulnerability is the soil in which every nerve pain grows. This is why the same wound terrifies one man into agony and is scarcely noticed by another in the heat of battle or rescue, when fear is displaced by a larger purpose. The matter is identical, the pain is not, because the pain was never in the matter. It was in the fear, which is a state of mortal mind, and it varied exactly as the fear varied. This is no small observation. It is the hinge of the cure. If pain were a fixed property of damaged tissue, it would be invariant. The same injury, the same agony, always. It is not. It rises and falls with belief, with attention, with fear and its relief, with conviction and its loosening. A property that varies with the state of mind is not a property of matter. It is a state of mind. The pain follows the belief because the pain is the belief. And when the belief of fear is met by the understanding that God is all and man is soul's unhurt reflection, the foundation of the pain is removed, and the pain with it. 6. The confirming witnesses. The boil does not testify alone. Eddy gathered the ordinary evidence that mortal experience itself supplies, once one knows how to read it. Consider contagion, which physiology credits to matter passing between bodies. Eddy read it otherwise, that the carrier of the so-called infection is mortal mind, not matter. that we take a disease much as we take up a yawn or a fit of weeping in a room full of it, by mental contagion and shared belief. The body did not catch the fear caught the body. If the transmission were truly material, the calm and the convinced would fall as readily as the frightened, and they do not. The variability betrays, again, that the operative cause was mental. Consider, too, the long record of belief, producing and removing symptoms with no material agent at all. The inert remedy that heals because the patient is sure of it. The harmless substance that sickens because the patient believes it poison. Such cases are an embarrassment only to the theory that pain and disease are material. To Christian Science, they are not anomalies but illustrations. The symptom followed the belief, arrived with the conviction, and departed with it, while the matter did nothing, because the matter was never the cause. Mortal mind produced the phenomenon and charged it, as ever, to something else. 7. The great objection, answered without flinching. Now we owe the reader the reckoning this whole book has been promising, the objection that no honest argument may dodge. But I feel it. Whatever you say of causes and beliefs, the pain is here, now, and it is unbearable. Will you stand over a suffering man and tell him his agony is a mistake? The answer must be exact, because a careless answer here is cruel, and a false one is useless. Christian Science does not say the suffering is not occurring. It does not tell the man that he is not in pain, as though he were lying or imagining in the trivial sense. It says something far more freeing, that the pain, real as it is as a state of belief, is not the truth of his being and is not anchored in an organ beyond his reach. The dream that hurts the dreamer is a real dream and a false fact. To wake the dreamer is not to scold him for dreaming. It is to bring him the one thing that ends the dream, the light of what is actually true. Eddie never met suffering with contempt. She met it with the whole tenderness of the assurance that divine love always has met and always will meet every human need. The pain is taken with complete seriousness as the need to be met, and met not by conceding its material reality, but by displacing it with the present fact of soul's unbroken, painless wholeness. This is the difference between the cold denial that mocks a sufferer and the scientific denial that frees him. The first says, "Your pain is nothing, be quiet." The second says, "Your pain is a belief, and belief yields to truth, and the truth is that you are the reflection of a God in whom there is no pain to inherit and no nerve to carry it. Let us bring that truth to bear until the belief gives way." One abandons the man to his shout. The other walks up to the shout and answers it. 8. Return to the absolute, the painless reality. So even here, in the presence of the loudest claim, the verdict holds. Pain is not transmitted by nerves because nerves have no intelligence to carry a message, and matter has no mind to compose one. Pain is a state of mortal belief, rooted in fear, manifested through the body and named by the body's parts, varying as belief varies because it is belief. And the universal report of it establishes only that suffering is experienced, never that matter is its cause. Lift the eyes once more to the absolute, where this chapter, like every chapter, must end. In the science of being, God is soul, and soul senses its own infinite and perfect creation. In that sensing there is no pain, for there is nothing painful to be sensed, no injurable substance, no fearful belief, no nerve to ache. Man, soul's reflection, has soul's one painless sense and no capacity for any other. The pain that seems so certain belonged not to man at all, but to the dream of a material selfhood that man never was. Soul sense is man's only sense, and soul sense knows no pain. The shout, met at last and answered, falls silent. We turn now to a subtler and more frightening form of the nerve's claim. Not that it hurts, but that it breaks down, that it can degenerate, malfunction, and at last refuse the body its motion altogether. Chapter 6. The claim that nerves decay and disable, degenerative disease, malfunction, and paralysis. The claim of pain shouts and is gone. The claim we take up now does something more dreadful. It whispers and it stays. It says that the nerve is not merely a wire of agony, but a thing that can spoil, that it degenerates, that it malfunctions, that its decline is slow, measurable, and often pronounced beyond return, and that when it fails utterly, the body it served is left unable to move. This is the fear beneath the fear. Not that the body will hurt, but that it will betray and abandon its owner by degrees, and that nothing can be done but to chart the descent. No chapter in this book owes the reader more honesty or more gentleness than this one, for here the belief arrives wearing the authority of a verdict. We will meet the verdict, not by minimizing its weight, but by trying its foundation and finding the foundation is not there. 1. The claim as pathology makes it. Give it full and fair statement. Pathology holds that nervous tissue, like all matter, is subject to decay, that it can be worn, starved, inflamed, stripped of its sheath, scarred, or destroyed, that as it degenerates its function falters, sensation dims, strength fails, control slips, that some such declines are progressive, advancing despite all resistance, and that where the conducting fiber is destroyed or the signal wholly blocked, the muscle it served lies still, and paralysis results. On this account, the nerve is not only the seat of feeling, but a perishable component, and the body's tragedy is written into the corruptibility of its own matter. 2. The premise and the keystone, applied to decay. Lay this against the ground, and notice that the claim must satisfy 3 conditions at once, and cannot satisfy even one. To decay, a thing must first have life to lose. To malfunction, it must have a true function to depart from. To disable the body, it must first have been the body's enabler. We have already removed all 3 foundations. A thing with no life cannot decay. There is no life, truth, intelligence, nor substance in matter. Decay is the failing of life in a living thing, but the nerve, being matter, never had life of its own to fail. What has no life cannot lose it by degrees. A thing with no intelligence cannot malfunction. Chapter 4 established that the nerve neither knows, nor carries, nor directs. It has no office of its own. But malfunction means the failure of a function, and there can be no failure of a function that never existed. The nerve cannot do its job badly because it never had a job. The job was always beliefs, credited to the nerve. And a thing with no substance cannot lose its substance to corruption. Matter is mortal error, the unreal and temporal. That which was never real substance cannot really decay. It can only seem to, within the dream where it seemed to exist. The whole spectacle of degeneration is the seeming decay of a seeming substance, error appearing to consume itself. 3. Decay as error testifying against itself. Here is a turn the belief never expects. Its proudest evidence, the visible corruption of the flesh, is not evidence against Christian Science, but evidence for it. For what does decay actually demonstrate? It demonstrates that the thing decaying was never the substance of man. The real is eternal. Spirit is the real and eternal. Whatever corrupts, passes, and dissolves, thereby confesses that it is not the real, not the eternal, not the man God made. Decay is matter's own confession of its unreality, spoken in the only language error has: dissolution. So when the belief points to the degenerating nerve and says, "Behold, here is the substance of man failing. Christian Science answers, behold, here is the proof that this was never the substance of man, for the substance of man is spirit, and spirit does not fail. The man of God's creating, soul's reflection, has no perishable part to lose. Man is incapable of sin, sickness, and death because man is spiritual, and the spiritual does not degenerate. The degeneration is real only as a belief about a body that was never the man. The verdict of decay falls entirely upon the dream substance and never touches the dreamer's true selfhood, which stands, as it always stood, in the incorruptible likeness of God. 4. Malfunction has no function to fail. Dwell a moment longer on the word malfunction, because it smuggles in everything Part 2 has been removing. To call a nerve malfunctioning is to assume it had a true function, that there was a right working from which this is a falling away. But we have seen the nerve has no working of its own to fall away from. It does not sense, chapter 5. It does not know or transmit, chapter 4. These were always beliefs activities attributed to the fiber. What then is malfunction? It is simply belief altering its own phenomenon. The same mortal mind that produced the appearance of a working nerve now producing the appearance of a failing one, and crediting both, the function and its loss, to the matter. The kitten that mistook the mirror for a second kitten now sees that second kitten grow sick and grieves for it. There is no second kitten to sicken. There is no function to fail. There is belief, changing its picture and signing the body's name to the change. 5. The law of degeneration, and who made it. The most binding feature of degenerative disease is its air of law, its progression by rule, its predicted stages, its dread reputation for advancing whatever the patient does. This lawfulness feels like the signature of reality. Surely a thing so orderly, so regular, so indifferent to wish, must be real and material. But Christian Science asks the one question pathology never asks. Whose law is this? There is one lawgiver, for there is one God, omnipotent. There is no power apart from God. A law of progressive corruption, advancing against the patient's good and toward dissolution, is no law of God, for God is life and love and good, and legislates nothing toward death. Then whose law is it? It is a law of mortal mind, a rule that belief has made and belief enforces, the carnal mind first inventing disease and then decreeing the manner of its advance, so that it must obey the very ordinance it wrote. The orderly progression of degeneration is not the majesty of material law. It is mortal belief keeping its own grim appointment, prosecuting the sentence it pronounced upon itself. And precisely because it is belief's law and not God's, it carries no authority that the law of God does not overrule. Where the law of spirit is brought to bear, that man is the incorruptible idea of incorruptible mind, the lesser law of degeneration is seen to have no jurisdiction, having never been enacted by the only power there is. 6. Paralysis, the extreme case. We come to the gravest form of the claim, where the nerve does not merely decline, but is said to fail completely, and the body falls still. Paralysis presents itself as the final proof that motion depends on the nerve. Cut the fiber, block the signal, and the limb cannot move. Surely here, the belief insists, is matter's governance laid bare. But the claim contains an assumption the book has already denied and will deny again in chapter 8, that motion was the nerve's to give in the first place. It was not. Man's activity, like his intelligence and his sensation, is reflected from mind. It is the expression of life, which is God, not a current generated in tissue. A thing that never granted motion cannot withdraw it. The stillness called paralysis is not the nerve's veto upon a power it owned. It is mortal belief's picture of arrested activity, attributed, as always, to the matter. And here Scripture does what argument alone cannot. It demonstrates. To the man sick of the palsy, his body by every material measure unable, the Master did not prescribe for the nerve or mourn the prognosis. He spoke to the man as the present, perfect idea of God, and said, "Arise, take up thy bed, and walk." And the man arose. What does this prove? It proves that the disabled body obeys not material law, nor the failed nerve, but the present power of God, the moment that power is understood and brought to bear. The palsy did not yield to a better current in the fiber. It yielded to truth, which recognized no paralysis in the man God made. Eddy explained the whole mechanism of such healing in a single sentence. Jesus beheld in science the perfect man, who appeared to him where sinning mortal man appears to mortals. Where others saw a paralytic, he saw God's unimpaired idea, and that correct seeing was the cure. The motion was never in the nerve to lose. It was in life to be revealed. 7. The objection from the visible, the measurable, the irreversible. The belief musters its heaviest objection here, and it deserves a full hearing. This is no matter of feeling and fear. The lesion is visible. The decline is measured. The scan shows the damage. The chart shows the fall. The prognosis is, in the hardest cases, irreversible. Will you deny what instruments record? The answer turns on remembering exactly what is on trial. What measures the lesion? The material senses, extended by instruments that are themselves material and report to the same senses. But the material senses are the very witness whose testimony this entire book is examining and finding false. To answer the question, are the material senses reliable witnesses to reality, by appealing to what the material senses measure, is to let the accused testify in his own defense and call it acquittal. The visibility of decay is not a fact outside the dream. It is the dream's own internal consistency, error measuring error, and finding the books balanced. That a false sense can quantify its own falsity with great precision does not make the falsity true. A nightmare can be detailed. The detail does not make it daylight. And irreversible, that hardest word, is a verdict rendered in the court of mortal law by the same belief that wrote the law of decline. Divine law does not recognize it, never having enacted the decline it is said to seal. This is not a promise about any particular case, made lightly across the distance of a page. Christian Science makes no such cheap assurances, and this book will not. It is a statement about jurisdiction, that the final sounding sentence of material prognosis is pronounced by an authority that, in the presence of the one power, has no standing. What looks irreversible to the senses that authored it is simply the dream insisting it cannot be woken from. The whole testimony of spiritual healing, from the palsied man forward, is that it can. All of this is held with the weight such diagnoses carry. To say the foundation is unreal is not to make light of the experience, which may be as crushing as any in mortal life. It is to refuse to grant that experience the one thing that would make it hopeless, a material reality beyond the reach of God. The kindness here is not in softening the claim, but in denying its finality, and the denial is scientific, not sentimental. It rests on the allness of God, which leaves no second substance to corrupt, and no second power to seal the corruption. 8. Return to the absolute, the incorruptible man. So the whispering claim, like the shouting one, has no ground to whisper from. The nerve cannot decay, having no life to lose, cannot malfunction, having no function to fail, cannot disable the body, having never been its enabler. Degeneration, far from disproving science, confesses that the corruptible was never man. The law of decline is mortal belief enforcing its own sentence, overruled by the one lawgiver wherever his law is understood. And paralysis is not the nerve's withdrawal of a motion it never owned, but a belief of arrested activity that yields, as the palsied man proved, to the present power of God. Return then to the absolute, where alone the matter is finally settled. In the science of being, man is the reflection of soul, of life, truth, love, and bears their nature, living and therefore undecaying, whole and therefore not malfunctioning, the expression of infinite activity and therefore never still. The relation of God and his idea is indestructible. It knows no lapse into degeneration and no return from it, because it never departed from the perfection in which it was created. There is no decaying nerve in that man, because there is no nerve and no decay, only soul, sensing its own incorruptible creation, and man, reflecting that sense as his only sense. Soul sense does not degenerate, for it is the constant capacity of the changeless mind, and what it beholds is forever whole. We have seen the nerve fail to hurt and fail to fail. We turn now to its claim upon the past, that it does not merely feel and decline in the present, but remembers, that it stores the record of what was suffered and holds trauma in the body like a wound that will not close. Chapter 7. The claim that nerves store trauma, memory, fear, and the record in matter. The nerve has claimed the present in pain and the future in decay. Now it reaches for the past. It says that what was once suffered is not finished, but kept, filed in the body, written into the nervous system, lodged in the flesh as a record that outlasts the event and reopens at a touch. This is the claim that the body keeps the score, that trauma is not merely remembered, but stored, deposited in matter, carried as a wound that will not close because the tissue itself will not let it. Of all the nerve's claims, this one wears the most modern and the most compassionate face, and so it must be met with the most care. For the very tenderness that surrounds it can make its falsehood seem heartless to question. We will question it precisely because of compassion, not against it. For if the wound is sealed forever in an organ no will can reach, the sufferer is condemned, and if it is held in belief, the sufferer is free. Christian Science labors to show that the second is the truth. 1. The claim as physiology and psychology make it. State it generously and at full strength, for it is widely believed and sincerely held. The claim is that overwhelming experience imprints itself upon the nervous system, that the body encodes fear below the level of memory and language, that the imprint persists in the tissue, in the reactive circuits of the brain and the responses of the flesh, that years later a sound, a smell, a posture can trip the stored record and the body relives what the mind had hoped to leave behind. On this account, trauma is not a thought one could choose to set down, but a physical deposit, archived in matter, replaying itself without permission. The nerve is here the keeper of the past, and the body the locked room where the past is held. 2. The keystone. No intelligence, no record keeper. Bring the keystone to bear, for it strikes this claim at the root. To store is to keep a record. A record is information held and retrievable, and holding, indexing, retrieving, and reading information are functions of intelligence. We have seen, and it is the settled finding of Chapter 4, that the nerve has no intelligence whatever. A fiber that cannot know cannot keep a record, for there is nothing in it to do the keeping and nothing in it to read what is kept. Storage without a keeper is not storage. It is a figure of speech borrowed from minds and lent to matter that has no mind to honor the loan. And the lifeless body testifies here as plainly as it did to intelligence and decay. The brain and nerves are present, whole, in the body from which memory has fled, in deep insensibility, in injury that erases years, in the long fading where the tissue remains but the recollection does not. If memory were stored in the matter, it would remain while the matter remains, as ink remains on paper. It does not. Memory comes and goes while the alleged archive sits unchanged, and that which departs while its supposed container stays was never in the container. The stored trauma is no more lodged in the nerve than yesterday's reflection is lodged in the mirror that showed it. 3. Memory is a state of mortal mind, not a deposit in tissue. What, then, is memory if not a deposit in the flesh? It is a state of mortal mind, a present act of belief, representing its own picture. This is the decisive correction, and it changes everything about the supposed permanence of trauma. The past is not a place where the wound is stored. The past, as a fixed material deposit, does not exist at all. What exists is the present belief that continually reproduces the picture of the past and presents it again as if retrieved from a vault. There is no vault. There is only the recurring act of mortal mind, mistaking its own present production for a message from a sealed room, the kitten once more, taking its own reflected motion for the stirring of another creature behind the glass. This is not a lessening of the suffering. It is the relocation of it from the unreachable to the reachable. A wound stored in tissue is beyond the sufferer's hand. He cannot edit his own nerves. But a wound that is a present belief, represented now, is held exactly where truth has its whole power, in thought, in the living present, where mortal mind can be met and corrected. The trauma is not chained to the body's past. It is occurring, if it occurs at all, now, as belief. And the now is the only place healing ever works, because the now is the only time there is. 4. Fear, the rehearser. If the trauma is not held by the tissue, what keeps it returning? Fear keeps it returning by rehearsal. The reason a remembered terror endures is not that matter refuses to release it, but that fear will not stop replaying it. The belief is readmitted again and again, and each readmission is taken for fresh proof that the wound is still there. Eddie named the remedy with great exactness, and it is the working heart of this chapter. Hold thought steadfastly to the enduring, the good, and the true, and you will bring these into your experience proportionably to their occupancy of your thoughts. What occupies thought is brought into experience. The traumatic picture endures an experience exactly in proportion to its occupancy of thought, and it occupies thought because fear keeps opening the door to it. So Eddie set a guard at that door. Stand porter at the door of thought, admitting only such conclusions as you wish realized in bodily results. You will control yourself harmoniously. This is not the suppression of suffering, which only drives it deeper. It is the refusal to keep readmitting, as present truth, a picture that has no present reality. The trauma is not stored and waiting. It is being let back in, and the porter's office is to recognize the visitor, fear, in the costume of memory, and decline its claim to be the truth of the present moment. We are, Eddie said, all sculptors, molding and chiseling thought. The man who believes his form is fixed by a chisel that fell long ago has only to discover that the chisel is in his own present hand. 5. The compassion this claim demands. Here the argument must slow and bow its head, because nothing said above is meant to fall lightly on a person carrying real anguish from real events. Christian Science does not say that nothing happened. It does not tell the sufferer that the violence, the loss, the terror of the past was unreal in the trivial sense of never having been undergone, nor does it command him to simply cease feeling by an act of will, which is cruelty dressed as counsel. What it says is gentler and far more powerful, that the harm, real as the experience was, did not write itself indelibly into a substance he cannot reach, and does not constitute the truth of who he is. The cruelty would be the other doctrine, the verdict that the wound is encoded forever in the flesh, beyond the reach of any present grace. Against that life sentence, Christian Science enters its plea. The record is in belief, and belief is not the man. Divine love always has met and always will meet every human need, and it meets this one not by denying the need, but by dissolving the lie that the need is permanent and material. To bring a sufferer, this is not to abandon him to get over it. It is to refuse to leave him chained to a past that has no real hold, and to stand with him in the present where alone he can be free. 6. The objection from involuntariness. The belief raises its strongest and most sincere objection here. But it is not under my control. I do not choose the flashback. The body reacts before I can think. The startle, the racing heart, the response that floods in unbidden. Surely a thing that overrides my will proves it is stored below choice, in the body, in the nerve. The objection feels decisive and is not. And it fails for the same reason the objection from reflex failed in Chapter 4. That a response is involuntary does not prove it material. It proves only that it operates below the level of deliberate thought. And below deliberate thought is not the nerve's private archive, but mortal mind's own basement, the region of habit, where belief runs so swiftly and so far beneath notice that it seems to belong to the flesh. The frightened man's heart races without his bidding. This no more proves fear a property of his blood than the involuntary blush proves shame a property of the skin. The involuntariness is the very signature of belief operating by habit, and habit, however deep, is precisely the kind of thing that yields, not to a single act of will, which it outruns, but to the patient, repeated displacement of the false by the true, the steady work of the porter at the door, until the habit of fear is replaced by the habit of truth. What seems hardwired is deep-grooved belief, and the groove can be unworn by the same mind that, in error, wore it. 7. Return to the absolute, the man with no traumatic history. So the nerve keeps no score. It has no intelligence to record, no archive to store. Memory is a present state of mortal mind, not a deposit in tissue. Fear, not matter, rehearses the wound and keeps it returning. And the very involuntariness that seemed to prove the trauma physical proves only that belief has run deep. Deep, but not beyond the reach of truth. And now the absolute opens the last and largest freedom. In the science of being, God's creation is finished and perfect. The spiritual man, soul's reflection, was made whole and has never fallen. He therefore has no traumatic history, for the history of harm belongs to the dream of a material selfhood that he never was. God is the eternal present, the I am, not the I was. And the man of God's making is new every moment, not because he has recovered from a wound, but because in truth he was never wounded, the injury having befallen only the dream figure of the second creation, the mist man, who has no real existence to have suffered. Behold, I make all things new, is not a promise to repair a damaged past. It is the revelation that the real has always been new, untouched, unscored. Soul sense knows no past wound, because soul senses only the present perfection of God's creation, in which nothing was ever broken to be stored. Remember Lot's wife, who turned to look back and was lost to a backward gaze. The freedom of science is to face wholly forward, into the only time God occupies, where the man he made stands undamaged and entire. The nerve has failed to hold the past. It now makes a claim upon the will itself, that it does not merely feel, decay, and remember, but governs. that it drives behavior, compels action against intention, and rules the body by a law of its own. To that claim, and to the so-called law of the body, we turn next. Chapter 8. The claim that nerves govern behavior, will, compulsion, and the so-called law of the body. The nerve has reached for the body's feeling, the body's future, and the body's past. Now it reaches for the man himself, for the will. This is the most intimate of all its claims, and the most enslaving, because it does not merely propose that the body suffers, but that the body rules, that behavior is driven by the nervous system, that action can be compelled against intention, that appetite and habit issue from the flesh and override the man, and that the body governs its owner by a law of its own making. If the earlier claims made man a sufferer in his body, this one makes him a prisoner of it. And so this is the chapter where the affirmative finally comes fully into view. For to overthrow the claim that the nerve governs is to restore to man the dominion that was his from the first creation. And dominion, not endurance, is the true subject of this book. 1. The claim as physiology and psychology make it. Stated at full strength, the claim is that behavior is the output of the nervous system, that drives, urges, and compulsions arise in the circuitry of brain and nerve, that what a man does is, at bottom, what his neurology dictates, that appetite is a physical craving the body generates and the will cannot finally refuse, that habit grooves itself into the tissue until the flesh acts of itself, and that in compulsion, the body plainly dictates to the man, who looks on at his own conduct as at something done to him. On this account, the governing seat of the self is matter, and freedom is at most the narrow margin the nerves allow. The man does not rule his body rules him, and calls the arrangement law. 2. The keystone. What cannot know cannot rule. Bring the keystone, and the claim staggers at once. To govern is to direct conduct toward an end, to choose, to aim, to command. But choosing, aiming, and commanding are acts of intelligence and will, and the nerve, as Chapter 4 established beyond recall, possesses neither. A fiber that cannot know cannot decide. A thing with no purpose of its own cannot direct another thing toward a purpose. Government is the highest exercise of mind, and the nerve has no mind. To say the nerve governs behavior is to say that the unintelligent directs the intelligent, that the purposeless purposes, a contradiction the moment it is stated plainly. The governor of man, whatever it is, must be a mind, and the nerve is not one. 3. One mind, one government. Then who or what governs man? Here the premise gives its great affirmative, the one this chapter exists to recover. There is one mind, and it is God, and the one mind governs its own creation. Mind is the master of the corporeal senses and can conquer sickness, sin, and death. Man is governed by the divine mind whose image and likeness he is, and by nothing else. For there is no second mind to issue a rival command, and no second power to enforce one. The very dominion the nerve claims is, by the structure of being, already and only God's, exercised in and as the man he made. From the first creation this was so. Man was made in God's image and given dominion, set to govern, not to be governed, placed over the so-called creatures of the material picture, not beneath them. The nerve's claim to govern is therefore not merely false, it is an inversion, the servant declaring itself the master, the picture commanding the painter. Christian Science does not negotiate the share of government the body may keep. It restores the whole of it to mind, where it always lay. 4. What governs motion? The deferred question answered. In Chapter 6, we set aside a question and promised it here. If paralysis is not the nerve's withdrawal of motion, then what governs motion at all? The answer is now plain. Motion, like sensation and intelligence, is reflected. It is the expression of life, which is God, the infinite activity of mind shining forth in its idea. Man moves not because a current fires in a fiber, but because he is the living expression of the living God, and life is never inert. The body, such as it appears, is moved as a thought is moved by the thinker, not as a machine is driven by its wiring. This is why the palsied man could rise at a word. Motion was never the nerves to grant or refuse, but life's to reveal. And where life was understood, the motion appeared, the failed fiber notwithstanding. The nerve was never the engine of action. It was the name belief gave to action it did not cause, crediting the wire for the work of the mind that moved the man. 5. Compulsion and appetite, the hardest form. We come to the claim's sharpest edge, where it presses hardest on real lives. Compulsion, the appetite that will not be refused, the habit that acts of itself, the craving that seems to issue from the flesh and drag the man behind it. Here the belief seems beyond dispute, for the sufferer himself reports that he is driven, that he does what he would not, that the body commands and he obeys. No honest book may wave this away, and Christian Science does not. But it refuses, flatly, the one conclusion that would make the bondage final, that the compulsion is the body's, lodged in matter, a law of the nerve that the man cannot reach. It is not the body's. Appetite and compulsion are states of mortal belief, attributed to the flesh. The craving is a conviction, not a chemistry, however vividly it wears the body's costume. And this relocation is not a lessening of the struggle, but the discovery of where the struggle can actually be won. A craving generated by matter would be beyond the man, for he cannot reach into his own tissue and revise it. A craving that is belief is held where truth has all its power. Eddy declared the freedom without hedging. Citizens of the world, accept the glorious liberty of the children of God and be free. And she named the bondage for the illegitimate thing it is. The enslavement of man is not legitimate. It will cease when man enters into his heritage of freedom, his God-given dominion over the material senses. Mark that this is not a rebuke flung at the one who struggles. It is a charter read out on his behalf. The chains are belief, and belief is not the man, and what is not the man has no lawful dominion over him. To bring the compelled person, this is not to scold him for weakness, but to announce his actual liberty, the freedom that was always his as the offspring of God, momentarily forgotten under the suggestion that matter was his master. 6. Why human willpower is not the answer. But here a grave correction must enter, or the chapter would hand the reader a false weapon and call it science. The freedom from compulsion is not won by human willpower, by the man clenching against his body and overmastering it by force of mortal resolve. Eddy was emphatic on this, and the point is easily missed. Human willpower is not a spiritual faculty, but a phase of mortal mind itself, and to fight the body's belief with the will's belief is only error wrestling error, with error sure to win in the end. The man who white-knuckles his appetite has not escaped the premise that the appetite is a real material force. He has merely opposed one mortal energy to another and exhausted himself in the contest. Worse, the strained exercise of human will edges toward the very thing Part 3 will unmask: the mesmeric, the self-imposed suggestion, the mind bending itself by force, and so the would-be cure becomes a deeper form of the disease. The true freedom comes the other way, not by mortal force overpowering the body, but by yielding to the divine government, by understanding, until it is felt, that man is already and only governed by God, that the appetite has no real power because it has no real substance and no real law, and that the liberty of the children of God is not a prize to be seized by effort, but a present fact to be admitted by understanding. The hand does not grip harder, it opens and lets the false grip go. This is the difference between the violence of repression and the peace of release, and only the second is science. The compelled man is not asked to become strong enough to beat his body. He is shown that there is no body to beat, only a belief to be relinquished into the government of the mind that never ceased to hold him. 7. The so-called law of the body. What of the law the body invokes? The body must have this. The nerves will demand that. This is how the system works. It is the same self-decreed ordinance we met in the degeneration chapter, now applied to conduct. Mortal mind makes its laws and then is bound by them. It first supposes that the body craves, then enacts that the craving must be served, then suffers under the statute as though it came down from heaven. But it did not come down from heaven. There is no power apart from God, and God enacts no law that enslaves his own image to a material appetite. The law of the body is mortal belief legislating against itself, and it holds jurisdiction only so long as it is consented to. Brought before the law of spirit, that man is the free and governed idea of the one mind, the body's law is found to have no authority it did not borrow from belief, and to lose that authority the instant belief is withdrawn. 8. The objection from predictability and demonstrable enslavement. The belief makes its last and most empirical stand, but behavior is predictable. Drives are measurable and regular, and people are visibly, demonstrably ruled by their bodies, the appetite kept, the habit unbroken, the compulsion winning year after year. Is this not proof that matter governs? It is proof of nothing but the depth and regularity of belief. Predictability is no signature of materiality. It is the signature of habit, of mortal mind obeying its own decree with the reliability of long consent. That a man is reliably governed by a belief no more proves the belief material than the punctuality of a superstition proves the omen real. And the appeal to demonstrable enslavement mistakes the whole posture of Christian Science, which does not arrive to ratify the bondage it finds, but to end it. The enslavement of man is not legitimate. The slave's chains are real to the slave and visible to all, and they are still not lawful, and still not the truth of his being, and still made to be struck off. The long success of a compulsion is the measure of how long the lie has been believed, never of its right to rule. And the record of bondage is precisely the record science exists to reverse, not to confirm. 9. Return to the absolute, dominion restored. So the nerve does not govern. What cannot know cannot rule. There is one mind and one government, and it is God's. Motion is reflected from life, and was never the fibers to grant or withhold. Compulsion and appetite are beliefs, not chemistries, broken not by mortal willpower, which is only error at war with error, but by yielding to the divine government in which man is already free. And the law of the body is self-decreed belief, overruled wherever the law of spirit is understood. Lift the eyes, then, to the absolute, where this chapter rests at last on its true theme. In the science of being, man is the expression of God's will, governed wholly by the mind whose image he is, free with the glorious liberty of the children of God, holding the dominion given him in the first creation and never truly lost. The body, in the only sense it appears at all, is the servant of mind and never its master. There is no fiber that commands the man, because there is no fiber and no command, only soul, governing its own creation, and man, reflecting that government as his freedom. Soul sense does not drive man toward an end he would not choose. It is the conscious capacity of the one mind, and in it man knows himself as he is, not the prisoner of a nerve, but the free and governed idea of God. The nerve has now failed to feel, to fail, to remember, and to rule. It makes one more claim, the subtlest and most disarming of the five, because it does not threaten but seduce. That whatever else it cannot do, the nerve at least gives pleasure, and that this gift, of all things, surely proves sensation real and the body worth keeping on its own terms. To that quieter and more dangerous claim we turn next.